Hi everyone, it's really great to welcome you here this evening or today, depending on where you are, or very late at night for some of you. My name's Dee Hedden and I'm really delighted that I've been invited to chair the exploration and discussion of walking as a political gesture. We've got a fantastic lineup of contributors today. But before we get going on to hearing from them and about their work, I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping. We're using the Zoom webinar platform for this event, which you've probably already recognised. And this means that on your screens you see the panellists and we see the panellists, but we don't see you, the attendees, and you don't see each other either. If you'd like to know who is joining us today in our virtual space, there's about 130 folk. You can click on the participants button at the bottom of your screen and that will bring up the attendees' names. And you can use the chat function if you wanted to send private messages to anyone you see there that you might want to say hi to. I also would just say that you're muted so that we've sort of cut off any background noise that might just feed into to folk talking. And that we're going to be using the question and answer function of the Zoom webinar. And I would encourage you to type in questions as we go along to that. The format is that I'm going to invite each speaker to speak in turn for a maximum of 10 minutes, and I will cut them off as we get to the 10-minute point. But we're going to hold the questions and discussions that those questions prompt till after we've heard from all of our panellists, just to ensure that we've got time to hear from everyone. But don't feel that you've got to wait till the end to put in any questions that you might have. If they're coming to you as you're listening, go ahead and put them in there. And I'm really grateful that I'm going to be supported in managing the question and answer part of the event by Robin Wolseley, who's Deverin's project manager. So I'm very grateful to Robin. I'm also grateful to Robin, who's managing the technology of this event. And I think all that remains to say, perhaps, is that we send our collective pleas, PLEAS, to the virtual gods to be benign today and to keep our connections strong. If for some reason anyone drops out and the connection falls, I just do also want to say that the event's being recorded, and that get in touch with Deverin Projects after the event if for some reason your connection fails. I have to hope that none of the connections fails for our speakers, but we'll deal with that if it occurs in the best way that we can. So let's make a start then. It's a huge privilege, as I say, for me to chair this event, and I really do thank Claudia Zeiss, the founding director of Deverin Projects, for inviting me to be the chair. I've had a long-standing personal and indeed professional research interest in the politics that are variously attached to walking, including who gets to walk, where, when, in what way, why, with who else, and with what potential impacts and effects. Walking is an action that's always embodied and placed, so embodied and emplaced, and it carries different bodies into different places, staging encounters with issues of access, ability, mobility, freedom, enforcement, independence, collaboration, demonstration, and visibility, to name just a few of walking's touchstones. Today's discussion is part of Deverin Project's annual event, the Slow Marathon, which this year is led by artist Iman Tajik. And I'm just one of hundreds of people across the world who've signed up to participate in this virtual collaboration, aiming to collectively walk around the world in an act that explores and demonstrates global solidarity, virtually crossing borders which, in the real world, are closed to many people who have no or little freedom of movement, or who, on the other hand, are forced to move and keep on moving. So we're going to hear from each panellist in turn as we explore collectively different forms of socio-political walking from across different parts of the world. And then once we've heard from our speakers, I hope to open that out into the wider discussion about the art of walking as a political gesture, extending our thinking by thinking with you, our listeners. Given that the discussion is part of Deverin Project's Slow Marathon, I thought it'd be useful to begin by introducing and inviting our first contributor, Claudia, who's joining us from Huntly in the northeast of Scotland, which is a population of 4,500 people. It's a small market town. Now, the founding principle and method of Devon projects is that the town is the venue, meaning that all of its projects connect together artists, communities and place. And under Claudia's directorship, Devon Projects has a long and enduring interest in and commitment to walking as a social, artistic and political practice, as well as commissioning and supporting artists to undertake walking work. The Slow Marathon was initiated in 2012 in collaboration with Ethiopian artist Merit Kebede, who has aimed to walk from her home in Addis to Huntly, an ambition that was thwarted in part by visa restrictions and border controls. But in addition to such projects, Claudia has herself completed long-duration walking projects motivated by wider political contexts. So Claudia, over to you.
Thank you. Right, let's try this sharing. And thank you very much, Dee. So this is myself. I have always been walking. I originally come from the foothills of the Alps, and walking has always been something part of my life and in a way kept me sane, if I'm still there, sane. This is myself here walking in the Cairngorms. But the other thing is I've always been interested in politics, in particular issues that deal with human rights and borders and such things. And here you see myself in 1983, walking at an event that was organized in southern Germany between the cities of Stuttgart and Ulm. It's about over 100 kilometers apart, where we all created a human chain. So you had to walk really far to get to this point, and created this human chain in protest against the huge increasing armament by American and Russians. And that was at the height of the Cold War. And you have to remember that this was before mobile phone, before internet, and in total 40,000 people took part in this. So I just put this picture up because to illustrate that I've been in many sort of walking activities, demonstration walks and rallies, that I found always a way of very empowering way to do this. But then I came to Scotland and I came to Huntly for all kind of reasons, and lived here and was introduced to the arts. And before that, I worked always in human rights with the British Refugee Council and also in the Netherlands. And and here in Huntly, we created the slogan, room to roam. So room to roam in a kind of spiritual sense, as well as in a geographic sense, gives us the opportunity to explore the area and explore possibilities. And I take you now through a few projects that we have done. And it started with actually Hamish Fulton, who, when we have done many projects, in total over 100 that connect with all kinds of spheres of life. But with Hamish Fulton, he came in 2010, as far as I remember, and he introduced me to the idea of walking art. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. You know, I never had heard of such a thing. And walking, and something that brings my two big passions together. And so here that was at the time when the Cairngorm National Trust was created. People were very upset. But we could show by walking through, he spent 21 days walking through the Cairngorms, we could say that this is just a political construct. The landscape belongs to everybody. And that led me to the idea of setting up the so-called Walking Institute. It's a kind of peripatetic school for connecting people through various things to do with research and mapping, and with activities and path making. And what I do now is I show you a few projects. So this was an earlier project in 2011, where with somebody called Rocker Gatteridge, she's a real activist currently living in Nairobi, where we got quite upset about the new visa regulations that were introduced by the Home Office. They're called Tier 5 visa regulations. And so we decided to walk along the English-Scottish border from a place called Upsetlington to Hungary-Law via another place called Shitlaw. And so that it was an event that was both to do with walking as well as with discussing through a so-called walker chat. Another project is, Dee has already mentioned this, it was what actually happened is I was persuaded to do a marathon in Berlin, it was, and I kind of hated that whole experience. About 40,000 people turned up and it was such a lonely day. Myself, I was power walking rather than running, but sort of after 2/3, I started overtaking the slower runners. And that's when slow marathon was created. I thought the idea of a marathon is actually a really empowering thing in a sort of more Greek sense of way. But what I couldn't understand, why is everybody competing against themselves in particular? And so I went to Ethiopia and identified a very nice artist called Amirat Kebede. And she had the idea to walk from her place to ours. And that would have been 225 marathons she would have to do. She could, of course, not do that. Too many visas, too many deserts on the way. But what we did, this is her, what we did is we identified 225 people here and 225 people in Ethiopia who would walk her to us and walk her back. This is myself with her. And we are dishing out the medals because the slowest of them wins. And what was particularly important here is that she linked our walkers in Scotland, in Huntly, with the walkers in Addis through the shoelaces. And here we exchange our shoelaces, always one from Huntly, one from Scotland, with the addresses of the other person. And here we're walking through our countryside. And here are the Ethiopian walkers at the other end of the globe. Mm-hmm. And so this slow marathon we did every year again, and it is a sort of annual kind of walking festival, but always with another political theme that then leads to Huntly. So here's an artist called Stuart McAdam. This was 60 years after the beaching cuts, and we were looking at the loss of transport system, public transport system, and he's cutting himself through the bushes and forests of a former railway line that led Huntly to the Moray Firth. And there you see a couple of images of that route. But we had other topics to do with borders. We had a topic about women walking. We had a topic about energy. Every year a different one with a different artist, but always thinking back of the original slow marathon idea. But anyway, for us, it is really important to always link the very local with the global, Huntly with the wider world. And that has to do a lot with the many issues we have around human rights today, really, and the freedom of movement have to do with colonialism. And the first colonials were also the missionaries. And here is one of many missionaries came actually out of Huntly into different countries of the world. And here is somebody called Alexander Mackay, and he went all the way to the kingdom of Buganda. This is the king, and this is the missionary Alexander. And up here are his porters. He was against slavery, but had all these porters. And so we tried, and his mission was to Christianize that area. And with a number of artists, we tried to retrace his steps here in Uganda. But then also, today Uganda is a highly Christianized country. So this is on a tents on the way. We identified an artist called Sana Kadeja, who then returned back to Huntly. Here he's dressed himself as a bishop, bringing Christianity back from Uganda to Scotland, where hardly anybody these days goes to church. Mm-hmm. And another project is about human rights and the freedom of movement. How can we connect with an artist who can never come to our country? And this was with Mai Murad. She is from Gaza, and she could never come and travel to us. And so what we do, we matched Mai, she's a painter, with another painter from our locality. She's called Rachel Ashton. And you see them, so they could only connect on the internet, but what they did, they took each other for a walk. And they could basically, they took each other constantly for a walk and would paint only each other's landscape. And that's what you've had a portfolio of work at the end. So the would, for the first time in her life, paint green landscape and green hills. And same Rachel, she ended up painting actually a lot of gray rubble. So, and as the last one I want to tell you about is my own, I've done, again, a lot of walking, and through the introduction of the idea of walking art, I have really connected much more of how to topics. And then in 2016, Britain voted to leave the European Union, i.e. Brexit, and that I was incredibly upset at the time. I'm still upset, but I have learned to live with it. And my board was very kind and said, why don't you take a break and do something? And so what I did, I felt I wasn't sure if I'm at home here anymore. And so what I thought, I just walk from home to home. So I walked from Huntly to my mother's place in the south of Munich. And here you see myself with my husband. He's my good company all the time, looking over Huntly and arriving in this place. And here's my mom, yeah. And here are all the postcards I've written to her daily with my thoughts of why is it so important to be, what holds Europe under its skin.
Thank you
very much. This is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. And in fact, that was exactly 10 minutes, so I didn't interrupt this.
Okay.
So thank you so much for setting this.
It was 8.
I know. There we are. I don't know whether you're extemporised, but you were within 10 minutes. And thank you for setting the scene so well.
There you go.
Devon projects, but also you within Devon projects and part of and beyond Devon projects. I think it's really useful to have that scene setting. And I can confirm that I was part of the border walk, and it was the most torrential day in the UK. And it was a really miserable walk, which probably seemed quite fitting for the context. And I also was at Merritt's slow marathon, and I've still got the shoelaces from that project. So I've been walking along with Devon projects actually for too long now that I want to remember. Nearly a decade, I guess that is. So thanks for that. So now let me introduce our second panellist, Hippolyte Niguriwa, who's joining us from Kigali in Rwanda. Hippolyte's an artist and an activist, and he's a child survivor of the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi, and continues in his art and activist work to promote reconciliation and peace throughout Rwanda and the African Great Lakes region. And in 2019, Hippolyte envisaged the remarkable Be the Peace Walk, which was a 100-day performance piece in which he walked across the country in commemoration of 25 years since the end of the genocide. Be the Peace is, in Hippolyte's words, a performance of remembrance and resilience from brutality and fatalities towards a more peaceful future. So welcome, Hippolyte, and thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your work with us.
Thank you. I am a survivor of the genocide carried out against the Tutsi people in Rwanda in 1994 genocide. Many people from my family were killed and some were raped in front of me when I was just a child. My dad was killed and fed to the dogs to eat. I never had a chance to bury him. I survived by hiding under dead bodies, in mass graves. I lived like a wild animal, hiding in the bush, but always expecting that I would be killed at any second. I was only 7 years old. I knew many of the killers. Some were my neighbors, others were our friends. I have played football with their children and went to school with their children. But because of the hatred that was taught by the government for so long, They called us their enemies and wanted to kill us all. I walked miles to a refugee camp. That was the time I escaped the slavery from the killers. It was a miserable life in a refugee camp with every kind of disease. It was life with no food and life with no security. The only wish we had was to die and leave the misery behind. Luckily, I survived it all. But my eyes saw what no child should see, and my ears heard what no child should hear. A few months after the genocide, I had to start my primary school. For most of the school day, I would be sitting in class, remembering the faces of people I had seen murdered, or recalling the screaming voices of children and women I had heard being killed and raped. Even today, these are my nightmares. Somehow, I was able to succeed in my studies and graduated to secondary school. But when I was 15, I faced one of the most testing times of my life. The classroom had been my only source of healing and hope. But I had so little money that I could no longer afford the $5 cost of transportation to a new school. So I stopped going. All the frustration of my young life came to the surface, and I started to imagine ways that I too could become a killer and avenge the deaths of my father, my relatives, and the people of my village. I kept walking back to the place where my father was killed. It was outside of a hospital near there where I met a Congolese medical doctor who spoke to me and helped me back to the right path. And because of him, I went back to school. Everything changed in my mind as I realized that ethnicity was not what was killing us, Rwandans, but a hatred that was taught for so long and resulted in genocide. After this realization, I made the most important decision of my life. I chose to forgive. I chose to forgive those people who killed my father, my relatives, my friends, and all those other innocent people. Now, I go back to my village where my mom still lives, and I visit the people who killed, even those who killed my father. I shake hands with them. I even hug them and lift up their kids. We share food and drinks, and they come to the ceremonies.
Lolita, can I just interrupt you for 1 minute? I'm very sorry to do this. Hamish, could I ask you to mute your microphone?
Yes.
Because I think there's a bit of feedback coming in. It may not be from you, but I'm getting some messages from people. I don't know whether this will make a difference, but Hippolyta, just so that you know, some of your talking is coming in and out a little bit. I'm going to mute myself now in case it's now my microphone that's causing the interference, but I just wanted to check everything. This is such an important story that you're sharing with us, Hippolyta, that I would want to give every opportunity that it's heard clearly. So please please accept my apology for interrupting at that crucial moment.
Thank you. I have forgiven them not because forgiving is easy, but because I want them to learn the price of lasting peace. 26 years after the genocide, I walk and I'm walking for peace now. In 2019, 25 years since the end of the genocide, I walked Be the Peace Walk, a 100-day performance piece. I walked across the country of Rwanda in the commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi. I covered each of Rwanda's 30 districts over 100 days. One for each of the days the massacres took place. I planted trees, I visited care homes for the disabled and elderly, and ran food and clothing drives. I met survivors and perpetrators. I walked and played football with their children, the children of Rwanda. I walk the peace, the hope, the love through the suffering and memories of life. I walk my belief that peace is what you give, not what you ask others to give. Let's all make this world a much better place. Let's all be the peace. Thank you so much. That was my story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hippolyta, for sharing your story with us this evening. It's quite difficult, I think, probably for everyone to follow after that. I'm sure you're going to have a lot of chats and comments in the comments box there. So thank you so much for joining us, sharing your story, but also ending such a message about our sort of collective capacity, I guess, and commitment to walking for and forging peace through walking as a reconciliatory practice. So thank you for that. So we'll pick up questions and discussions after. So I'd like now to move on, and now there is a little bit of interference, as I said, and we've all been muted, so it isn't coming from the panelists, so I don't know whether it's coming from source. Robin, I don't know whether you've got any more information that you would be able to shed any light on where that might be coming from, because I know some of our attendees are asking.
I'm looking into this just now. I think it might just be coming as a bit of feedback either through your mic or potentially another speaker, but I'm looking into it just now.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks for that. And we will persevere. It is what it is. We are all from literally around the world tonight, so a few technical problems doesn't surprise me really. So I'm now delighted to welcome our third contributor, Hamish Fulton, who's joining us this evening, and it is this evening in our space, Hamish, from Canterbury in England. Now, Hamish is an English artist, though I'm advised that he has Scottish parents. I don't know if that's true, Hamish, yes. So I'm not making that up. And Hamish has been making walking art and only walking art since 1972. So I think that we can say without hesitation that that's a commitment to the form, and a commitment in Hamish's enduring insistence of walking as an art form in its own right. Hamish does present his walking experiences through mixed media, including photographs and texts, but these aren't intended to be the walk. No walk, no work, Hamish says, which I really like. No walk, no work. I think Hamish is probably best known for his solitary, long-distance walks. And if anyone knows my research, you'll know that I've written about gender and walking. And I've taken a bit of a pot, if you like, at the solo white male walker walking, striding through vast and empty landscapes. So I'm just putting that out there, Hamish. I wouldn't want to have you here on any subterfuge. And so perhaps that some of Hamish's walking work conjures that archetypal figure of that white single man striding across and conquering apparently vast and empty landscape, though very few landscapes now are empty. And we know that Hamish's project for Devon Arts in 2010 was titled 21 Days in the Cairngorms, sort of signalling that endurance, if you like, and commitment to that endurance. But it's also important to know, and perhaps Hamish is less recognised for this, that for many years now, Hamish has also facilitated group walks in what we might think of as more quotidian environments that are perhaps still conjuring and asking for endurance, but in a more domestic, benign space, perhaps. So thanks for joining us today, Hamish. I'm going to hand over to you. Hamish, can you just unmute your microphone? There should be a little microphone image at the bottom of your screen that you just need to click on to unmute.
It's just on the lower left-hand corner of the screen.
Is Hamish frozen? Oh, there we are. Thank you, Hamish. Over to you.
All right, yep, my apologies. And just to say immediately that that was an absolutely extraordinary presentation there, Hippolyte. I am absolutely stunned to hear your story, and so my mind is completely stunned in a sense by your story, and my thanks to you for sharing it with everybody. And so yeah, the position that I'm coming from is one entirely different from the position that you were describing, and also then immediately we compare it with what Dee was talking about, the solitary white male walking across the landscape, full stop. But what I would like to say at the beginning is that the two words walking artist, neither of those two words describe an art medium. So immediately my idea of this is that I free up the whole kind of issue of what is the art going to be, what's it going to be made of. So therefore, walking art, you still don't know what it is that's being made, but you know that something is happening, which is the walking experience. So if we were to say that you're a sculptor, then you have immediately a problem, because now you're checking into the whole history of all kinds of sculptures made in the past and in the present. So I didn't want to do that. I don't want the association with an art medium like landscape painting or outdoor sculpture, land art. So if you have landscape painting, then you're going into the ability of the person to be able to make the painting, and then you may be drifting into the issue of land ownership because of the sponsorship of painters and landscape architects in the 16th century in England. So all of this, in a sense, is a complete distraction. So what I say is that what I've always wanted to do is to emphasize the experience of walking. So I can mention just very briefly, two walks that I made. One was on the 2nd of February 1967, when I walked with a group of other London art students from St. Martin's School of Art in the centre of London, and we walked from the front door of the art school from a busy street in the middle of London out to the countryside, and we ended in a green field. So that was the idea. There was a transition. So then I spent the next 6 years thinking about this and making all kinds of different art about essentially about the landscape and walking in the landscape. But in 1973, after one walking journey of just over 1,000 miles from northeast Scotland to southwest England, then I became completely enlivened by that experience, and therefore made the commitment. It was, I think, 16th of October 1973, And I decided then that I would want to be a walking artist and be exclusively a walking artist and not be an artist who made sculpture, outdoor sculpture, land art, and walking. So that's not me, that's another artist. So what I do is I specialize in walking. And then walking then, over the years, since that commitment, has taken me into different ideas about walking in society. And so I went with my partner, who was just on the screen a while ago, Nancy Wilson, in 1969, and we visited the American West. We went to South Dakota, and in South Dakota, we visited various sites of what are called American Indians, or other people might call indigenous peoples. So we visited Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, the Lakota Reservation, where the present day status of these people is absolutely dire, because you have a very high rate of teenage suicide, alcoholism, unemployment, and so on. So we visited there. We also went to a place called Wounded Knee, where there was a Wounded Knee massacre in 1890, where 300 Indians were shot down by the US government. And then in 2005, so I've jumped from 1969 to 2005, I was invited to the University of Urbana-Champaign in Illinois for a symposium on walking. And there I met a man called Dennis Banks. And Dennis Banks was one of the co-founders of the American Indian movement. And the reason that he had been invited to speak was that he made a special protest march all the way from more or less California, the West Coast, all the way to the Bureau of Indian Affairs in Washington, D.C., forming a protest against the treatment of American Indians, like the ones I was describing in South Dakota in the Pine Ridge Reservation. Today, there are people, for instance, like Winona LaDuke, very articulate, extremely interesting, very important activist who works on behalf of US indigenous peoples. And so the whole topic of land ownership, which would be in Scotland, because I think Scotland has the greatest, the largest areas of land owned by the smallest number of people in Europe, I believe. So the whole topic of human beings relating to the land. And then you mentioned white males. So there's nothing I can do about that, but for myself. But the issue is really that from walking then, because at the beginning I said walking is not painting, it's not sculpture, it has a freedom to it which allows people from all sorts of walks of life and different areas of interest, including studies of brain activity, all kinds of areas of interest, can work with walking. And so it turns out to be an enormous subject worldwide, but at the same time, walking art in contemporary art is not recognized in any way at all. So all the things that Claudia has been doing with regard to walking, which are extremely interesting and connecting with different people, this within the established world of contemporary, this has gone completely unrecognized. There's no acknowledgement of that whatsoever. Now may I ask Robin, please, to put on the image. Well, yes, thank you, Robin. So this work is one of a series of works which I've made, which all start with the title Chinese Economy. I've made maybe 10 or 12 different variations. And each line you'll notice, maybe each word, Chinese economy, Chinese migrant, Tibetan refugee, silence, each one has 7 letters. And so it forms a kind of type of a grid. And then in reading the walks that I made, flowing round with the crowd, right shoulder, way of the sun, walking 7 circuits of the Bakor Kora round Jokang Temple at night by the light of the September full moon, Lhasa, Tibet, 2007. So there's far too much to say about this, because this is just an enormous, this would fill a book if I was able to kind of relate to the whole story. So I went to Tibet with my daughter in 2007, because we knew that in 2008, the Beijing Olympic Games would alter absolutely everything to do with the people living inside Tibet and the land of Tibet, and China's relationship, especially with the US, which is what we have today. So that today we have the trade war between the US and China. And so this work, Chinese economy, attaches itself to that. But my interest for Tibet goes back several decades. But in this work, I'm talking about the date 2007. So I made a second walk in 2007 around Jokang Temple. It's worth me noting that the Jokang Temple on, I think, 17th of February 2018 was on fire. And so the Jokang Temple, just to tell everybody, is regarded as the most sacred site in all of Tibet. And people for centuries have gone on pilgrimage to this building, which now, as far as I understand it, is now not allowed, has been banned. Tibetans are not allowed to visit, go on pilgrimage to this sacred site. Then I have to move on down, and then I arrive at walking 154 clockwise circuits of the Tibetan Lingkhor at McLeod Ganj, Himachal Pradesh, India, 7 to 29 November 2013. So it's very sad and difficult for me to say that this is now 2020, and that date says 2013. But very sadly, between 2009 and November 2019, 154 Tibetans have self-immolated, and one of them self-immolated at the Jokang Temple. So what we have is Chinese economy, Chinese migrant, Tibetan refugee. So in a sense, there is nothing insulting about this work to the CCP, but it does tell the story that the Chinese economy has fueled the world. The Chinese migrants have been given the opportunity to work not at their normal altitude, but at higher altitude. They've been given great opportunities of employment, but sadly, the indigenous local Tibetan people were forced out and had to leave, and so they became Tibetan refugees. And McLeod Ganj, or Dharamsala, is where a great many Tibetan refugees have found their new home, because they traveled at great danger over the Himalaya, suffering from frostbite, and also in more recent times being shot at by the Chinese border guards. So the Chinese economy, I'll finish now, the Chinese economy is what pays to silence China, Tibet, and the world with regard to the politics and the state of affairs within Tibet. So money has paid to silence the whole story. And I've made many of these, 10 or 12 of these Chinese economy works, and basically nobody ever commented on them at all, because it's simply, at that time when they were exhibited, the issue of the Chinese economy and the China-US trade war was not a new story. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Hamish. A really fascinating project to end there, your contribution on, and for us to think through the sort of, I guess, sort of hidden in some senses, politics that are there if you look for them more carefully. So thanks so much for that. I'm now delighted to introduce our fourth speaker, Kubra Kademi, who joins us from Paris. So hi, Kubra. Kubra's an Afghan performance artist who actually is in exile in Paris. And Kubra's work, which obviously we're going to hear about, explores her life as a refugee and as a woman. Now, I first encountered Kubra's work at the Walking Women Festival in London in 2016, when documentation of her walking performance, Armour, which was made in Kabul in 2015, was screened. I won't say any more about the work because I know Kubra's going to show some images from that. But Kubra was forced to flee Afghanistan when a fatwa was issued in response to Armour, And I'm just sort of in awe of Kubra's bravery, if that doesn't feel too strong a word there. Kubra's continued to make walking work in Paris and in France in general, including Eternal Trial and Kubra and Pedestrian Signs. And I think I certainly saw an image of the latter of those two. So I know you're going to talk about at least one of those. So Kubra, and thanks for joining us today and for sharing your work and thoughts on walking as a political gesture. I am hoping that sometime we do get to meet in shared space and time rather than just in virtual platforms. So fingers crossed for futures where we come together. Over to you, Kubra.
Thank you so much. Robin, can you just show the picture along? First pictures, please. Just to talk about my work, I mean my art, or I mean more precisely about my walking works. I have to first of all introduce myself, who I am. Well, my name is Kubra. I was presented, but more precisely, I have to say that just before talking about my work, I have to say how important is my identity in my work in general. I am woman, I am Afghan, I am refugee. And since 5 years, I'm in exile, but so far it's been like, since I am making performances in walking, being woman and being refugee were the two important factors, or the motor who really inspired me, gives me the reason to make art. Walking itself for me is, first of all, when I start walking is exactly the time that I had to get married. In my culture, I have to also introduce myself, where I come from. I'm born in which family. I am Afghan, and I am born in typical traditional Afghan family, who's like, I have 5 sisters, I have 4 brothers, and in my family, girls get married super soon. I started walking, or it was more flannery for me. It was still for me, walking is a practice that a woman shouldn't do, and a man has to do in my family, in the way I am raised. Men is like, what I know in my family, even my brothers, if they don't have to go to school, if they stay at home, even watching TV, my mother or my family encouraged them that go out, play outside. Man is animal desert, or something like that. So it was, for me, outside public space especially has been super mysterious and space for me, and unknown. But when I grew up, like teenage time, and I had to get married, I start like standing against this and refusing it. So this is how I after winning this fight with my family, I told them that I have to go to pursue my dreams. I have to go. I have to live by myself. I want to go to university, study arts and things. So this is how I start walking. I was walking for no reason, first of all. So this was flannery. And I always finding a reason to tell my roommates that after, when I was not living with my family, that where I go, I always had to have a reason. Just saying that I'm going to walk, no. Women don't do that in my country. Women should not do that in my country. But I did a lot, and I explored a lot of things. And this is how I thought, I found like how it's like, how I'm thinking as an artist, as a female artist, while I'm walking in Afghanistan, in Kabul. As I say that in this piece, which is I that I'm not walking, but I made this piece I imagined this piece while walking in public spaces. In this piece, as you see, that I picked up some items from some objects from my room, and I installed a kind of my room there, and I am doing some super basic and super banal small activities, like I'm drinking, I'm reading, I'm lying down. I was doing a lot of things, but in a situation extremely opposite to what I do. Like these subtle and super simple gestures were exposed in a situation extremely different and super wild and dangerous, that well, the vehicles, some of them had to find their way how to pass without like trying not to hit me. And then this piece was highly inspired by the life we lived with my family as refugees, because I was born during war, and my family migrated from Afghanistan to Iran. And then during Taliban time, we migrated to Pakistan. And then after 2001, we had the choice of going back to my country. So being refugee, living with this situation of not belonging to anywhere, but still we live, and then we find our way to continue living. These simple gestures, these simple banal activities for me was the struggle we do in the war situation or post-war situation, or in immigration life. We can pass to the second slide. And back to my country, as I said that I was walking a lot. It was not something new for me. Why, as a child, like we girls, we are not supposed to go out. Why? Because it's like it says to you it's dangerous, because it's not for the girls. It's like outside is for the for male presence, not any no, well, even, but when I grow up, I understood that it's not this. It's still the same. If you're a little woman or you are a grown-up woman, you have to deal always with sexual harassment and in fact, let me correct myself. The culture of sexual harassment in Afghanistan, in big cities, are like way more challenging for the woman to appear outside. And a person like me who makes like walking like 10 hours per day and coming back home, like looking for what I wanted to, what I wanted. I mean, it was so personal, as I repeat, and while making other reasons for other things. But what I was looking in the city was something as a basic. It was not something that I knew, even I didn't know the walking is this important for me, but I was walking because I shouldn't have walked. And for me, it was so, it was important to, I mean, to first of all to prove for myself, and then I come up with making a piece of performance that like knowing and counting, even like I counted, even I have been harassed 10 times per day, and then each time I have to react in a way. I have to, if I have to scream, I mean, who is blaming me around me? And these things were like the detail I was exploring, like by the time walking in. And then I respond to this practice of sexual harassment in public spaces. I made this costume, like shape of my like highlights, like my breast, my buttocks, and then the zones that it's like attacked constantly by men in all ages. This image is very symbolic for me because we see like teenager boys, like children to like almost all ages in this picture, and it is super and it is exactly how this space is being taken by male dominant power in Afghanistan and in my culture. And so respond to that, I made this walk where exactly in the center of Kabul, where which is considered this place one of the most dangerous places for women. It's huge, it's only men, and the women, if they have to pass, I mean, they have to face really this like order, like from this massive male domination that shouldn't be there. And so I made this walk here that it was successful work. I finished it, but during maybe you want to play the video just shortly, the beginning of it. Just explain.
I'll play a minute of that video just now.
I think it's fine. Yeah, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so, after this image, I mean, immediately it's like, immediately, but slowly it was getting more. I couldn't live in my country. I couldn't, I had to leave. I had to like hide for first of all. And then I think after 25 days after, I arrived to Paris. And this is where this performance, which is still another walking, in another form of walking, I put the things, everything that I could bring from Afghanistan, because the way I come, it was not a decision. It was not planned, and I had to flee. And so I put the things that all belongings, let's say my whole life, on my head, and I was with bare feet. I'm walking in Paris. It was like, it was after like. I had to leave Afghanistan, but when I was like, after a month or something arriving here, I become once again like in the teeth of like the local news in Afghanistan, that this Armor girl, she's found in France now, and this was like it was once again it become a cruel reaction from society to my work, that why the fact of me remaining alive was once again not acceptable. And so this is how I had to walk barefoot in Paris. This piece is called From Sunrise to Sunset in Paris. So I walked from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. this way, without any decision which direction or any map planning, but it was only in Paris. And yeah. Can move to the next one. I still keep walking in Paris, in France, and in the other cities, and I'm making, like, while walking and thinking and making work respond to public spaces. I found out this is a supermarket in abattoir in Molenbeek in Brussels, where the all entire market is the sellers are men, and I chose to be a female seller, so that's why I called myself, I am Eve. Eve is a seller. This piece is called Eve is a seller, and therefore I am selling all these fruits and vegetables, highly sexualized, and while making dialogue with audience or my customers, I sell all of them till like end of the end of the performance. It was quite interesting, and sometimes very deep dialogue with people. Everybody is familiar with Eve herself and myth of her, Eve and the fruits and the guilt. There's this story behind it, and the fact of me being like a seller there was like, it was quite provoking, and it was super interesting discussion it created. We can move to the next one.
Hooper, we probably have to finish off quite soon.
Okay, the next one, please. I think I'm in the last one. Yeah. So I chose few of my. This piece is also another performance that I came up with walking in Paris a lot, and is because in Afghanistan, in Kabul, we don't have this light everywhere in Kabul. It's just on few spots in the city. So this one is quite interesting for me to see how if I feel myself in this, like the sign or these little like public regulations. I mean, but I am supposed to follow, and then looking at others made me think that how I make parallel with this sign, and in a female form. So that's why I walking. It was few hours of performance. It was meant to be by night, because my light had to be visible, and I made a lot of discussion with audience while passing and talking to me, making questions. I can continue while answering questions.
Okay, thank you so much for that, then, Kibra. Thank you very much for sharing that, and it's just so interesting to see the different contexts, but still the sort of potential controversies that your work generates. So thanks for sharing that, and we'll come back to hopefully to some further discussion around that. But we should move on to, last but not least, I'm delighted to introduce Iman Tajik, who is leading this year's slow marathon titled Under One Sky. And Iman joins us today from London, though in fact he's usually based in Glasgow, which is also the city where I'm joining you from today. So I am in Glasgow. You're not missing much weather here, Iman, I can tell you that. So Iman's an Iranian artist who works across video, photography, installation and performance, and his work addresses issues of contemporary conditions of life with a focus on migration and globalization. And the artwork speaks to personal experiences of crossing geographical borders and socio-political barriers, and the need to resist these through arts practices to promote and drive global equity. So Iman, thank you so much for this year's slow marathon, which I know we're going to hear more about, and I really appreciate collaborating in that. I'm handing over to you now.
Thank you so much. Yes, maybe, I don't know, I'm just I don't know, like automatically I just start to introduce myself, and then I show some presentation about 4 of my work. So maybe I just move on that and I start talking about it. Yeah, thanks so much. I'm Iman, Iranian artist. I live in Glasgow. I'm based in Glasgow. I live and work there, and I came to Glasgow in 2012 as refugee. And I just live there, study in Glasgow School of Arts, graduate in 2018, and as an artist, I'm just working and making some work. So very quick, I'm just, because of terms of timing, I just maybe I have to speak about the work which I'm using more, the walking medium in my work. I'm in my practice art, as you say, I'm using photography, video, and making installation and performance, and and also walking. I'm really look at the walking as medium right now. And since I use the walking in my artwork, but I didn't see that so much in the medium. But since I met Claudio and I know about her work and her institution, so I just more understand about the walking medium, and just I'm kind of beginner of the exploring and learning, and yeah, just I don't know, investigating about the walking medium. So I think I'm very quick. I have to say, like, my subject matter in my artwork is mostly focused on borders and freedom of movement, especially for the human as a species. And that came from my personal experience, who born in Iran, always facing with the borders and always restriction with the movement by like traveling, or by, I don't know, immigration, or even when I want to refuge somewhere, I had a problem with these borders and my basic human right of freedom of movement. I think we are really forget about our basic human rights, which is the freedom of movement, but we just completely forgot about that. That is our basic human rights. So maybe I'm just showing this work which I made in 2017, and I was just making video that is like more. I'm just maybe I go very fast in there, and maybe I stop that because I think it's very strange noise. I don't know. But this work I'm gonna show you is very short video from installation. Is more about my body and land, and I start make this work when I have my refugee travel document, and then I could kind of almost free in the different lands. So when I go in the different lands, I just like I don't know, like very. Yeah, I just record my feet when my feet is hitting, touching the land of the different part of the world, and I just record them, and then I present this video in that way, which was front of the wall, and then the landscape of this my walking when is arrive to the wall is just distracted, and is speak change very differently. So in this work is more my body and land, and yeah, the freedom of my body in the different lands, which I made this work. And yeah, I'll just move on in the other one. The other work I made in 2018 when I was graduate from the Glasgow School of Art in 2018. I call this work a series of A to B. So still in this work, I use the walking as expressing the freedom of movement. So in the video one, I just walk from point A to point B, like from the background to the front ground. And in the second video, I make the white string by white tape, and then my movement is become distracted by these barriers, and I have a very uncomfortable like form of body, and takes so much time to move from A to B, and there's so many reasons why I choose this space. I mean, what they call the nature really doesn't have any borders, and just all borders which we have is the human made. And yeah, so I don't know, maybe we don't have so much time, so I don't go so much in the details. Well, everything in this video performance work is got a reason. So in the one video, I'll just walk from point A to B, try to cross these barriers, and I have this uncomfortable feeling and takes so much time and not really pleasant movement. And in the other video, I start just break all these barriers, and that's what I really hope we happen in the world. We just break all borders and barriers. And the other work I'm going to talk about is called Border Mice. That was actually collaboration with Claudia. I commissioned for Glasgow, Biennale Glasgow International Festival 2020, which is postponed for 2021. This work, we used the walking experience for the participant. We asked the people to join us. Maybe I should say this work is making attention to the detention center, is the immigration center, detention immigration center. Maybe in the other word I have to say immigration prison, and it's very stupid we have that, because I think immigration is not really crime and you don't need to be prison in that. But anyway, this work was making attention to these places and also raising awarenesses about these places, which is conflict of the freedom of movement of the human with the borders. So we asked the people to join us for the walk from Glasgow Central to the Donegall, which is almost full marathon. And in the journey, I was supposed to make the site installation in the places which they are divided on the context of the borders, because the borders is really surrounding ourselves. Like we have a city borders, we have a council borders, we have, I don't know, party political borders. There's so many borders, but maybe they don't have really power as like country borders. So I just wanted to go in the community and meet the people and have a discussion about the borders and about the detention center, and then we make the installation in that places. And then in one day, people join us and walk from central Glasgow to the detention center. Is called in Glasgow one is called Donegall. So my hope was people experience of the movement of the body, start from point A to B, and in the journey they are interact with some borders, which these borders maybe doesn't have a very strong politic, but maybe who knows, maybe one day can have a really strong politic and disrupting people. So people walk from point A to B, experience of the movement of the point A to B, and they interact with the borders, and in the end we arrive in the place which exists because of the conflict of the borders and freedom of movement of the human. I hope we're gonna keep working on that project. I think it's very important, because I met so many people in Glasgow, even the people who lives close to this detention center in Scotland, but they don't really know about this place, or if they know about it, they don't have really information what's going on there, what is the effect of this place on the human, or how much is cost to run this project, this detention center. So yeah, it's so many, I think I see so many stuff is going on, like they're hiding the fact to the people in the social in the Scotland. So I don't know. I think I was actually very quite fast. Actually, I didn't really speak about my first work and my second work. I see the note here. I didn't speak about it, but maybe I'll just keep going. And if somebody have a question, I can answer the question. So this is also some instruction I made for the Border Miles project. But the last project I'm gonna talk very quick about it is called On the One Sky, which is also collaboration with the Claudio and Devon project. I commissioned for run this year a slow marathon of this year Devon project slow marathon. So we had other plan, but because of the lockdown and coronavirus outbreak, we changed our plan for the slow marathon. Actually, I think we did really well. It was really teamwork, and we've done really well, and it works really good. We had a global call and asked the people around the world to come together, and we walk around the world together. And so I think we have almost 270 people. I'm not sure if that is the most update one, but it's going very well. So we had I'm gonna say maybe in that way, this project for me is global call to join together in solidarity and also protesting against of the borders and limiting our human freedom of movement. And also I found, and that's something I'm really interesting, to have a conversation. So this is was really amazing place to have open up the conversation, like open up the worldwide conversation. So we as the team, we set up the Facebook page, and in there we have like our participants, they share their photos, their stories, or the things that are is very important for them. And also I talk to them about the things I'm look at is important to speak about it, about the borders and about the restriction of the freedom of movement. I think this time of the coronavirus lockdown, for me, it's become kind of very interesting opportunity to have a really more close conversation with the European Western people, because I think that is the first time after Second World War II they're experiencing of the limiting in the freedom of movement, or limiting by closing the borders and this stuff. And so I think for me, I mean, that things is not really new for someone who born in Iran or who is refugee. Is like we are always limited by movement of our freedom of movement, and have problem with these borders. So I think this project works very good and very well. And I think that's me. I think I'm super too much quick. So
thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, brilliant. Thank you. And I think if folk wanted to join the project, they can still do that, because we've still got quite a lot of miles to walk together. So they can, I know the link's been posted on the chat. So if you want to join Under One Sky and help us get the rest of the way around the world, and please do that. I find it fascinating seeing where folk are walking from and what we're posting. So I guess we should just first of all thank everyone, all of our panelists for speaking, and I'm sort of inclined to say maybe we should think of this as a bit of an introduction or a teaser, because I think really in retrospect, Claudia, we might have invited everyone individually to speak for 90 minutes and then, you know, had a discussion around each of these different artists' works, because they're all so rich and varied. And yes, of course, there are some interconnections, but there are also many, many differences. So maybe we could look forward to each of our panelist speakers coming back in the future at some point to talk more about the work that they're making and the responses to the work and the motivations for the work and where the work might be leading next. And having more time for more questions around that. I'm very alert to the time. We said we'd finish at 7:30. I'd quite like to use the chair's prerogative to invite those who are able to stay for a little bit longer, and I don't know if my panelists are able to stay or not, but if you are able to stay, we might continue an extra 5 minutes just to allow us to take some questions in from our listeners who I know have been posting their responses and reactions as folk have been talking, but now we are getting some questions in. So Robin, are there questions that we can just quickly begin to pull out here to at least get some discussion underway?
Sure. We had a fairly early on question, one for Hamish, but I would kind of maybe open this up to everyone. It's from Chris Gronveld. He's asking, as he's ignorant of this art form of walking, which is what brought him to this conference, he wonders if you could expand on the recognition or lack thereof of walking art and how it could be improved. Does it want for documenting, funding, or anything else?
Hamish, you need to unmute.
You're still muted.
The vagaries of the mute. While Hamish is unmuting, can I just use this opportunity perhaps also to say there's a Walking Artists Network email, just mail website, which has about 550 members at the moment, I think, from across the world, probably mostly in Europe, to be fair. So there is a sort of support network there for folk who might want to call themselves walking artists, and not everyone does. And of course, Devon Arts has the Walking Institute, which is itself a fantastic resource to find out more about what walking art is, who might classify themselves as walking artists, and what type of work that they do. I've put my email address on the chat room, I think, and if anyone wants to ask me about Walking Artists Network and how you would join that, please just drop me an email there. I'm very happy to reply to that and provide any other resources. We've also got a Museum of Walking. I know Andrew Stuck's in the virtual room tonight. Fantastic resource again, loads of resources there and interviews with walking artists. So there's no end of resource really, but that is, I'm now passing over to Hamish to answer the question about the professional scene of the walking artist.
Well, I've really enjoyed this evening very, very much, and I want to thank everybody for all their contributions, all of which I thought were absolutely extraordinary in different ways. Of course, there were links between all of them, but I think that maybe I don't know exactly how to answer this question, but I think that maybe it's a two-tier system that we've got now, because all of the panelists in describing their works, that none of these works were coming from a sort of established art position. And I think that what I've discovered in going to various conferences and symposiums over the last 10 years in different countries is that there are many, many people who are really interested in all of this, in making something out of their walking experiences, and very often their urban walking experiences and their political experiences. And so I think that maybe at the moment, I'm sort of sticking my neck out, but I think maybe all of the subjects that we're all interested in, I don't know that they exactly fit very well into contemporary art history. I sort of think maybe it's like two different systems, and it's not at all, in my opinion, that what we're all engaged in, and especially other people other than myself, I think it's very much better suited in the way that it has been presented tonight, rather than it feels obliged to conform to the dominant powers in the contemporary art world. Thank you.
Thanks, Hamish. Shall we take another question, Robin?
Sure. So we have a question for everyone, and this is from Rocca Holly Namby. She says, to all, when you set out making a work, do you try to ensure your work, your walking, tangibly achieves something political or social? Or is it just about the work, the walk itself?
Would anyone like to kick off with an answer to that? Iman, what would you like to have a stab at the sort of relationship between the work as an artwork and the walk, and what else the walk might do?
Yeah, I think for me, be honest, I'm look at the walking as medium is something very new for me, and maybe it's very hard to answer that, especially for me who is the beginner, to look at the walking as the art medium. Be honest, I'm just really explore. I mean, like 2 times I using the walking in my artwork, as expressing the body of the movement in the space, and expressing the owner of this body to expressing this movement and these feelings. And so honestly, it's very hard for me to answer, and I don't have really answer. For me, I'm just really exploring, and I have to say, I really enjoy, or I feel really comfortable to look at walking as art medium, and because I think it does really work with my themes and like my subject matter, and there's a really strong connection with the person who is participant for the walking, because they are like the full body and the mind is very involved with the walk, with the work. And I think there's a really good connection and inspiration, like expression of the participants for
And the man, sorry, I should have just picked on you like that. It was unfair of me, but I wanted someone to try to answer it. And I know Claudia's got her hand up, and so said Polita.
Yeah, okay. I keep it simple. I can obviously hardly call myself a walking artist, although I would love to. But I'm more having worked with artists. And I think what is really the importance here, I don't know if I answer the questions, but is not just walking an art, but walking art and politics. And it's this triangle that kind of makes it tick. And something I really feel I learned tonight is and from Kubra, something that resonates very much with myself is to go for a walk in order to get the idea. And I haven't kind of thought about it in that kind of way. Well, I feel that I need to go for a walk so in order to deal with a problem and come up with a solution, but often on the walks I get the ideas. And I found that extremely interesting that she is going and has more articulated it that way. I just had a quick question to Kubra on this point, is which I had written down, is do you always go alone on these walks, or is that in company?
This is my alone walk is the most like fruitful walking. I'm distracted when I walk with people. Like, it's just walk while we were talking. These images that I'm passing by, I am missing all. And the moments that I have to go through, I will miss that. But the walking in massively in demonstration, that's a different walking. But to walk with someone, I prefer alone.
Okay, thank you for that. Hippolyta, you were going to come in, yes.
I just want to say, Rocca say tangible achievements. That's also another probably political thing, tangible. But I want to say that, you know, when I walk, most of the time, most of the Sundays I walk, but what I do is to see the goodness in people, and, you know, people feed me, people gave me shelter, and people joined. So I think the achievement is to make people think, and even to see even myself, self-transformation of not always thinking, oh, if I walk out during the night, I'll be, you know, attacked or something. So there's also that thing. So if it's tangible, not tangible, I don't know, but there's that I aim to start conversation, and also to see the goodness, and invite people to see the goodness in people, because I know, you know, when you don't see something, or when you start with bad feeling, then it's hard to see the good feeling in the end. So yeah, and I can also comment on somebody said the public spaces play a big part. For myself, I just think I can also walk into, but because it's linked to the memories of people and refugees, and when it's about hiding, even now at this second where we're saying that people who are trying to escape, walking, not in public places, but in, you know, in bushes and other ways of escaping. So I just bring it memories, I bring it in the memories of people, and I say it as recognition, and telling people, you know, don't just think that, you know, world is just easy as for everybody, but remember, you can do something.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. So we're at just after past. Oh, sorry, Hamish. Yes, I was going to continue, but yes, here we go.
Thank Thank you very much. Just very briefly, what I feel about tonight is that the circumstances, the conditions of the experiences of everybody far outweigh the material results. And not to say that material results are not relevant. I don't mean that at all. I just mean that in this case, the life experiences are so powerful, so overpowering, and so important that if we were to convert that back over into normal contemporary art, then the physical experiences, the emotional experiences, the border experiences, the refugee experiences, the travel. For me, what I've taken from tonight is like so big and so important, and that what the material results were. It's kind of outweighed for me personally. That's my honest opinion.
No, I think that's a very cogent response actually, Hamish, because I've been struck listening to the works and to the speaking about it, like how autobiographical or biographical or really rooted in the experiential they are, and kind of using walking as that embodied experience to somehow engage with those other embodied encounters that are about, living, mobility, and dialogue, connection, disconnection, liberation, repression. And I suppose that's what I was meaning at the start, that walking just is this amazing, connector with all those different encounters in life. And I was very taken with how important public space indeed is to, or remains to, all of these works, that the walking takes place in public space of some sort, and it's those encounters that you seem to all have with people that allowed conversations and dialogues, confrontations as well as reconciliations. But it's not for me to talk. Shall we take a couple more questions, and then I suppose we'll need to try and think about wrapping up, Robin?
Yes, we do have we have a few more questions, which I hope we'll try and get a few more. So we have one from Annie Runkle, which is a question again for all panelists. She says, public spaces are endangered from many cities in Europe today from corporate and private interests. Does the notion of public spaces play a role in your work?
Which really connects with what I was just talking about. So would anyone like to just talk to, I guess, the need for the public space for the work and the risk to public spaces in our cities? And there could be different risks in different cities, I recognise that. Anyone like Hamish? Are you unmuting, or are you just...
Well, of course, I can speak if nobody else is.
Kubra, did you want to...
For me, public space and its challenges is why amazed me, and why it's important for me is because it's not the same for women. It's not what challenges women is not challenging men. So it is different. A man is walking, or it's different. A woman is walking. So this inequality in public spaces imposed based on the gender is quite interesting for me to think and to explore and to make work, with.
Brilliant, thank you. Shall we take another question? Robin, I have a challenge in seeing the questions and seeing the screen. I can see like one question, so I'm sorry about that. So I'm sort of leaving it up to you.
We have another question from Robbie, who says, wonderful introductions to your work and thank you. So I'm very pleased. He asks, thinking about walking very fundamentally, as in one foot in front of the other, do any of you have thoughts around walking practice in relation to people, perhaps yourselves in the future, who cannot perform this fundamental act due to age, disability, pain, or other factors?
Great. So that's really the question about who the accessibility to even walking. And I do note that Devon projects are very careful, Iman, in the text around the slow marathon to flag up that walking may not mean walking on 2 feet, because one may walk in a wheelchair. There's sort of a language of discourse there around presumptions around walking. But would any of you like to just reflect back a little bit about perhaps some of the questions around access to walking as an activity and how you might address that or have addressed that in your work?
I could just at least say that we think about it a lot. It is not there's no sort of very obvious answer to it, we have been really lately exploring the idea of proxy walks, how to walk with people who can't walk, you know, people who are maybe housebound, bedridden even, and how can we give them the experience of walking or walk on their behalf. Maybe they have walked in the past and you could actually walk on their behalf. And I've been also very interested in the work of Alec Finlay, who is talking about a day of access, where people, this is here in the Cairngorms, there's very much, you know, hill walkers enjoying this, and people who could never come, and how we can actually give them the opportunity for access, which is of course hits also something very political in this country, is and that is land rights and land ownership and so on. And at least yeah, all I can say is that there's something that is on our mind, but there is no easy solution in sight.
And I guess Kubra was indicating or gesturing, which is an appropriate word, towards the restrictions on walking in particular cultural contexts for women. So there's questions of access around gender, depending on the context in which you live there. So Kubra, I know that one of the questions was about you walking as a solo artist, and you've spoken to that, but would you ever consider doing a walk that I guess addressed questions of access to walking by inviting other women to walk with you in a context in which that might be prohibited or seen not to be appropriate?
I've been like, I do walk here like in demonstration, you know, normally in the like specific days. But yeah, I think geographies and the politics, it makes sense to walk from different part of the world to make a collaboration. I have not, I think, from London, Black was making walk every Sunday that I had to walk with him from here, Paris. I will do that to see sunrise. I've been proposed by him.
Yeah, that's Blake. Blake, yeah. Okay, great, thank you. Shall we take another question, Robin? If there is one.
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple more. There's actually just adding on maybe to what you were just talking about Kubra. Glenn Stoker asks, he mentions that you showed two images, one in Kabul and one in Paris, with a striking oppositional difference in the reception you received. And have you found that walking in Paris, where maybe you have more freedom, means that you're considered less exceptional or less urgent in your work?
Yeah, it's two different worlds. I have more freedom, of course, here. I don't need to cover myself. Well, I never covered myself in Kabul with burqa, with this extreme of like hiding. I never did, and I was not so. I was not so. How can I say it? So much like covering myself neither. But this was never the case. Women under burqa, women in any age, children, they are facing like sexually they are abused. And that I totally disagree. If hijab or if covering yourself is making you, protects you in my country. But in France, for example, like I haven't been harassed, but I avoid to go certain places, certain hours of the day, like in the night. I know this place I have to disappear now. So that exists in Paris. Paris is also very it's charged. It's like a different. It has different neighborhoods. It is also like for some reasons, through my walking, I explored that being the way I look. I first of all, I look like Asian, maybe Chinese woman. So this was, I felt it, like I was told, someone told me. And so it was like how, no, these are other layers. I deal with. I haven't been harassed here sexually. I haven't been raped. It's a difference. I have this freedom. Or for making work. More importantly, no one kills me. So yeah, it's huge difference.
So it's nearly 2:15, so I'm thinking we should probably, I'm looking at Claudia virtually, she won't know that. I wonder whether we should close this now and alert to folks' time. Is there one more question, Robin, that we should ask? Or
no, maybe the panelists have a question as well.
Yeah. Well, not all of you, because that would take another hour. I also want to say that Hippolyta has said on the chat that if you want to get in touch with him, his address, his contact details are on the website for the project Be the Peace Walk. It may be on Endeavour and Arts, I don't know. Does anyone have a question from the panelists that they would like to ask each other? Anything burning? Don't have to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We do have one question which might serve as quite a good from Chris Gronveld as well. He says, it seems that walking art as an art practice relies on individual experience, as we've heard from a lot of the panelists tonight, and their individual circumstances. Is walking the form itself, or is it a medium which generates performance and storytelling practices?
Okay, it's a great question, isn't it? Like, which comes first? Would anyone like to have a first stab at answering, responding to that?
Maybe I can say very quick, but for me it's more generation as I see my walking work as performance. So that can be my answer. But as I say, I'm just really exploring and I don't have really final answer for any question. Thank you.
Yes, Kubra.
Me, walking is like, because as a general, as an artist, me myself, I like my childhood is full of drawing. I was crazy. I was like a drawing animal. I was crazily making drawing. But well, like while I find myself, I do performance art. I think walking is that fundamental and so important for the performance art. This kind of, for me, is like drawing of performance art is walking. This is that important.
That's great. Thank you. Hamish, do you want to add anything? Well, you don't do a work without walking.
What I want to add is, well, what I want to say is I want to thank everybody because I really have found all this extremely interesting and inspiring, and it sort of really makes me feel really good about how we're all involved in our own different ways with the experience of walking, and so I'm greatly heartened by this evening, and for me it's been a wonderful experience to hear everything and also to learn about new things I hadn't thought of and new considerations, and also the seriousness of the experiences of some of the speakers. It's really been an extraordinary experience. My thanks to everyone.
Yeah. Claudia, before I close it, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I also, of course, want to thank everybody and the audience as well, that we sadly can't see ourselves. It's always a bit disorientating. And yourself, Dee, and I feel also that I kind of learned a lot. And I'm also, we often talk about the Walking Artist Network, but there's certainly something that could be said about it. It is still very of a sort of Western, if not British thing. And it is really great to widen the discourse with people from all kinds of countries.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. So I do hope that anyone who's assembled in the virtual space who wants to know more about walking art or is a walking artist, including the panelists here, just take a look at the Walking Artists Network, and if you're interested, join it so that we can diversify the conversations and stop making presumptions at the same time as we continue to use walking to challenge our everyday world, to make the world a better place, really, through walking through it. So I would like to thank the panelists immensely. It's been so fantastic to have the opportunity to hear about your work today, and I'm just really, really sorry that we haven't had more time to hear more from each of you and then to allow a discussion between you. So I really do mean it sincerely, that I hope that we might be able to come back into a longer form of space. I don't even mind that it's virtual. Somehow it's not the space, it's the time that is challenging to us this evening. And I'd like to thank Robin also for so brilliantly managing the space, because what's been going on behind the scenes is quite a lot of questions from Robin and myself. So there's a sort of hidden labour behind the very flat screen that you see in front of you, from our panellists, of course, the labour of the walks, the labour of being here this evening, the labour of sharing stories and thinking, but also the labour of Devon Projects team. So thanks to them too. And yes, finally, thanks to all of you for coming in this evening and giving your time to be here. And I hope that for those of you who don't know Walking Art, it's piqued your interest, and for those of you that do, that it's added to your knowledge base. And I would just say that actually there's quite a lot of work now, research and writing and performances on Walking Art. And you can find those resources, some of them in Devon Arts, but also on the Walking Artists Network, or again, email me and I can direct you to, because I know there was a question around how do you make the work, how do you publicise the work. I think there is quite a lot of support out there that we could direct you to, so we can do that offline. The recording of this will be available to anyone who signed up for the event. A link to that recording will be posted to you, I think, Robin, that's right. So if you had to miss it, or if the sound fell out at your end, it will be there for you to view. And we are, I think, collecting the comments and questions that have come in, and we can share those with our panellists too after the event, because I know there's been a great deal of appreciation from folk, and our panellists might not have had an opportunity to see folks' responses to the work that you presented, and that's a real shame. Robin, did you want to say something else?
Yes, just also that we have some questions prepared
that's right.
to kind of think on following the conference. It's a quick poll. It's in a kind of yes, no, maybe format, so I hope that's all right for everyone. But I'll launch this now, and to the participants who are still with us, it would be great if you want to take a look at these questions, and any further thoughts, please do get in touch with us at info@devon.
And these are anonymous responses, aren't they?
They're not anonymous, no, not anonymous responses, but you can answer anonymously.
And we won't be using them. I mean, they're just to sort of prompt the reflection. So okay, so thank you very much, folks. Please do fill this in. It's filled up in my screen now, so I'm going to fill this in myself. Thanks everyone. And I think the chat room will be open for a little while still, yes. Robin, if folk want to continue chatting in the virtual space, we're not going to kick you out. It is there. So just so that you know that. Thank you very much, and round of applause to you all. Thank you. Right, I'm going to answer these. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dee, for hosting.
Let me